Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Did you know that every year, thousands of people are wrongfully imprisoned simply for speaking out? Malisheva, a voice of resistance against corruption, may be one of them. Her story forces us to confront one burning question: was she imprisoned for telling the truth? In a world where truth often stands at odds with power, few dare to speak out. But Malisheva, a woman of unyielding courage, became a beacon for those fighting against systemic corruption. Known for her fearless stance against powerful elites, she exposed the underbelly of a corrupt government, rallying public support for reform. Her actions were celebrated by the masses, yet she soon found herself entangled in a web of deception and accusations. Arrested under dubious charges, Malisheva was thrown into prison, silenced by the very system she sought to expose. Her story raises a critical question: is justice truly blind, or is it manipulated by those in power? As we delve into the details of her imprisonment, we uncover a narrative that forces us to reconsider the cost of telling the truth in a world that seeks to suppress it. Malisheva's imprisonment did not occur in isolation. It was the result of a long, drawn-out conflict between her and the political machine she exposed. For years, Malisheva had been an outspoken critic of the government's shady dealings, from financial scandals to human rights abuses. Her words cut deep, shaking the foundations of those in power. It all began when she publicly exposed the embezzlement of public funds by top officials in her country, funds that were meant for critical infrastructure projects. Her revelations sent shockwaves across the nation, as she pointed directly to figures in high-ranking positions who had funneled millions into their personal accounts. With evidence in hand, she took to the media, unveiling what she called the most grotesque betrayal of public trust. While the public rallied behind her, demanding accountability, the government remained silent at first. The silence, however, was short-lived. Malisheva's continued outcry became a thorn in the side of those she had accused, and her growing influence was seen as a threat to the political establishment. What followed was a carefully orchestrated campaign to discredit her. She was labelled a traitor, accused of conspiring with foreign powers to destabilize the nation. Media outlets loyal to the government began running stories suggesting that Malisheva was not the hero she appeared to be, but rather a pawn of external forces seeking to overthrow the government. These accusations gained traction, creating doubt even among her supporters. The final blow came when she was accused of misusing her platform to incite violence. After a protest, allegedly inspired by her words, turned violent, the government had the justification it needed. Malisheva was arrested on charges of inciting rebellion and spreading false information. Her trial, which many believed to be rigged from the start, was a mere formality. Within weeks, she was sentenced to prison, effectively silencing one of the most vocal critics of the regime. But the circumstances surrounding her imprisonment raised more questions than answers. Why was her trial held behind closed doors? Why were key witnesses barred from testifying? And perhaps most damning of all, why was the evidence of her alleged crimes never made public? Malisheva's imprisonment is a clear illustration of the challenge faced by truth-tellers in authoritarian regimes. Her case highlights the delicate balance between the need for public order and the right to dissent. In her society, those who dare to expose corruption are often branded as enemies of the state. The charges against her were seen by many as a smokescreen, a way to silence a powerful voice that threatened to unravel the tightly knit fabric of the political elite. The tension between truth and authority was palpable. Malisheva's supporters took to the streets, demanding her release, but their protests were met with force. Tear gas and rubber bullets became the government's response to those who questioned the legitimacy of her trial. Still, despite the mounting pressure, Malisheva remained in prison, her fate a grim reminder of what can happen when the truth is seen as a threat. The day of her arrest was a turning point. Just hours before her detention, Malisheva had made a shocking revelation. In a live television broadcast, she presented evidence of a secret offshore bank account linked to the highest office in the land. The account, she claimed, was the depository for funds embezzled from various public projects. This revelation sent shockwaves across the nation. It was a critical moment in her fight, and she knew the risks she was taking. That night, her home was raided by security forces. Without a warrant, they arrested her on charges of inciting violence and treason. The arrest was swift, brutal, and calculated. As news of her detention spread, her supporters took to the streets in protest, but the government's response was equally swift, deploying riot police to quash the demonstrations. The key moment came when Malisheva was placed in solitary confinement. For days, no one knew of her whereabouts. Her lawyers were denied access, and it wasn't until international pressure mounted that the government finally acknowledged her detention. But by then, the damage had been done. The government had effectively silenced one of its most prominent critics. Malisheva's imprisonment has had a profound impact on the society she sought to defend. Her story has become a symbol of the ongoing struggle between truth and power, raising questions about the role of whistleblowers in corrupt systems. For many, her case represents the lengths to which authoritarian regimes will go to maintain control, even if it means imprisoning those who speak the truth. Yet, despite her imprisonment, Malisheva's fight for justice continues. Her story has inspired countless others to stand up against corruption, and her name has become synonymous with resistance. The international community continues to apply pressure on her government, demanding her release and calling for greater transparency in the legal process. Malisheva's darkest hour may have been her imprisonment, but her story is far from over. Her courage in the face of overwhelming adversity has sparked a movement, one that seeks to challenge the status quo and demand accountability from those in power. Malisheva's story is one of courage, resilience, and the price of truth. What do you think? Was she imprisoned for telling the truth, or was it a matter of national security? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to Storyteller and check out our other videos on whistleblowers, corruption, and the fight for justice.